At this time, I would like to invite Mr. Bill Elliott, Chairman of the Board, Elliott Electric Supply, to introduce our first speaker. Bill, will you join me here on stage?
Thanks, Glenn. Appreciate it. Well, it's a real pleasure and honor to introduce Alexander Cutler, or Sandy, as most of us know him. Sandy's Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Eaton Corporation, a $2.2 billion company that employs 102,000 people in 175 nations in the world. Sandy graduated from Yale University with a bachelor's degree in 1973 and an MBA from Dartmouth in 75. While attending Yale, Sandy was a multi-sport athlete playing defensive end in football and breaking his nose 5 times. It's been told to me that probably was a good experience for dealing with contractors, but his passion, though, is at tennis, and he continues to play a very competitive game today. His faith in teamwork and as a means of success was probably honed through his passion for sports. Sandy says he looks for integrity and leadership. As Sandy told a reporter, a facilitator, a coach, a communicator, we care about how we get results. After graduation in 1975, Sandy joined Cutler as a financial analyst in Milwaukee. Cutler was acquired by Eaton in 1979, and he held various positions with Eaton before becoming president and COO in 1995 and becoming chairman and CEO in 2000. In addition to tripling the business during his leadership, Sandy found time to serve on the board of DuPont, KeyCorp, the Greater Cleveland Partnership, the United Way, and Musical Arts. He is a past member of the boards of Amos Tuck School of Business Administration at Dartmouth College, the Lomas Chaffee School, the Cleveland Playhouse, and the Museum of Natural History. Sandy has chaired the Yale University Alumni Association, the Yale University Development Board, the Greater Cleveland Partnership, the United Way, the National Electrical Manufacturers Association, and the Corporate Governance Committee of the Business Roundtable. He is past co-chairman and co-founder of the Cleveland Commission on Economic Partnerships and Inclusion. He is presently on the committee organizing the Republican Convention in Cleveland, which will be very interesting, I'm sure. It should come as no surprise to know that Sandy's wife, Sally, who is here presently, is equally involved in organizations that promote the betterment of their community and strive to enhance the lives of all of its residents. Sandy and Sally met, believe it or not, at a dead fish festival in Milwaukee in 1978. And Sally was dating Sandy's best friend, and eventually they came to their senses, and Sally and Sandy got married in 1980. Last month, their son, Billy's wife, gave birth to twin boys. So I met Sandy for the first time in 1985. He was visiting our then 3 stores to get a better understanding of the electrical distribution business. He has a remarkable memory for friends, and that he met, and still ask about the people he met on that trip. Little did I know at that time that he would embark on a path that would turn Eaton, principally an industrial truck and aircraft components manufacturer, into a major force in the electrical business. During the time Sandy led Eaton, the company not only tripled their business, but now the electrical portion of their business represents 67% of their total revenue. Sandy's memory for names and loyalty to friends in all walks of life has been an inspiration to everyone who knows him. Sandy has been a friend of the electrical business and the electrical distributor. Partnership, fair dealing, and growth define the company. Elliott Electric Supply's decision to partner with Eaton, a company that respects and commits to distribution, became the most important decision we made. We appreciate Sandy's leadership. Sandy, before I turn the stage over to you, I want to take a moment to recognize your leadership and commitment to our industry with the NAED Life Achievement Award. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. You're going to keep the award. Well, Bill, thanks very much, and it's wonderful to be here with you all this morning. Thank you for this honor to the Board of Governors of NAED, and thank you all for being here this morning. Pretty pivotal time in our country, and a lot going on that our own industry can contribute to. But first, I want to thank Bill for that really generous introduction. Bill and I have known one another for a long time, and I can honestly say he's one of the individuals who's had an enormous impact on my own career and life, and taught me an awful lot about this industry. And I can honestly say I don't think Bill has forgotten much about this industry. I'm pretty sure of that, and I know your own team feels that. What I'd like to do this morning is to share with you perspectives on a number of the big milestones that changed our industry historically, and then more importantly, to try to reflect upon what those may tell us about the big changes that lie ahead of us over the next several years. I think we all recognize in the world today that almost all the conditions around us are changing more quickly and more fundamentally than we've seen ever before. And so the mistake that each of our companies, our individuals, and the individuals we're bringing into our organizations would make is to assume that the past defines exactly how we'll see the future. But let's start and talk a little bit about our industry. There's no question that our industry is made all the more stronger by organizations such as you see here, distributor organizations, manufacturer associations, standards associations, safety organizations, and then of course the governments around the world that we deal with in terms of the regulatory requirements that we face. That has been a tremendous a source of strength, I think, for the organization or for the industry, and it's given us all the courage to continue to develop the kind of products, to tackle the tough applications, and to have certainty around what the rules of the road will be. The rules of the road in the future won't be as clear as they've been in the past, and we're seeing quickly now many of these organizations being challenged in terms of their existence and their relevancy. As we extend from where we were, let's take a look all the way back to the beginning of this industry. The 1880s to 1890s were a period of fundamental transformation. It's when the real halcyon period of original technology development took place. We think back to the commercialization of AC power when it was predominantly a DC power industry at that time. We think about so many of the great breakthroughs that brought electricity into the lives of virtually all citizens. And you think back to some of the really terrific, outstanding leaders of the industry at that time. Names like Edison, Tesla, Westinghouse, McGraw, Krauss, Stanley, Bradley, Cutler, and Bacon. And while many of you may assume that I was related to Cutler, I was actually related to Bacon. He was my great-grandfather, and I'm enormously proud of the fact that he lived during those times when the industry really was going through its formative stages. As we progressed from that period of time, our industry continued to pioneer new technologies that made power available, made power economic. This facilitated the growth not only of industries, but also the powering and lighting of neighborhoods and cities. New developments in mass transit came quickly as we began to define ways to get people around those cities, and guess what? Most of that was electrical based at that time. The next big change in our industry came around the crisis of World War II, a period of time of the intersection of both national and worldwide emergency, necessarily new innovative designs, necessarily mass production on a scale that had never been seen in history. They augured in a whole new generation of production techniques, quality, productivity, and cost competitiveness. Jump forward another some 30 years. The 1970s witnessed the application of communications and computing technology previously applied only to mainframes, quickly moving to mini computers and then on to PLCs. Real-time industrial communication, coupled with the cost and performance breakthrough of power semiconductors, enabled an entire new capabilities in the industry and more broadly to the communities in which we live. Jump to the 1990s. With the 1990s came the cost-effective emergence of not only diagnostics, but now prognostics. For topics as mundane as motor failures, as complicated as broad-based systems analysis, and as small but as personally relevant as the arc fault protection in your own home. Energy management also became a reality with these new technologies. On to the 2000. Cost-effective LED technology began the biggest technology revolution in our industry since PLCs, not only reducing costs and helping longer lighting lives, but combined with the Internet of Things, launching a whole entire new generation of controlled lighting and integration of multiple sensing and communication modalities. My point in all of this is not to pick out any one technology innovation or to ignore any one of the many of thousands that have made a difference, but to help us understand that the fundamental growth of our industry has been very closely aligned to the GDP in this country, and you only have to look at this slide to get that sense. This is a fundamental industry. This is a base industry. This is an industry that drives growth, it drives productivity, and most importantly, delivers safety to the audiences who use electrical power every day. Now, as much as we talk about what has changed in the past, I think the question now is important about what has not changed. What was fundamental when the industry began, what is fundamental today, and what will be important for this industry going forward. Let's start with the role of safety. We provide the products and services to ensure the safety of the youngest child and the most senior of our senior citizens, and all the institutional and consumer clients in between. Applying electric power is inherently dangerous. And let us not ever forget our commitment to ensure the safety of not only the people who work in our factories, who work in our labs, who work in our distributorships, who service our customers every day, but the customers who are simply not as aware of the power they're dealing with. It's important that we keep that high focus upon safety in our industry and never let it fall prey to the pressures of profit, the pressures of productivity, or the pressures of expansion. Second, the role of service. We must be there when concepts for a new building, a new product, or a new process are being conceptualized. We need to be there when those same facilities or products are being commissioned. We need to be there when they're being serviced. We need to be there in the good times, and we need to be there during times of national emergency or weather disasters. We need to be there when a company loses its own application expertise, and we have to be there to support that for them. Service has and always will be a fundamental part of this industry, and it's part of our promise to our customers to keep them competitive and to keep them safe. Along with that role of service comes the role of education and advocacy. So many of you here are well versed in the standards and the regulations of our industry. They don't simply just happen. They happen by people like all of you in this room, participating in industry councils, participating on standards committees, participating with local inspectors to ensure that we not only have the right standards and the standards that are evolving to deal with the new technologies that we're applying, but that we also have the qualified people to be ensured that we bring safe, competitive product applied correctly to each application. Being here in Washington is a very apropos statement for this annual meeting, because the fundamental importance of the regulatory environments in our communities could never be higher than it is right now. And the role of our distributors. You're our distributors. You are our face to the marketplace. You provide such a broad array of services to our customers and daily support that to try to list them would be simply inadequate. You have been, over the long term, the rock of this industry, and as far as I can see, you will continue to be in the future. The manufacturer's commitment to the distribution channel in North America is exceptional. It is somewhat unique. It is larger than in any other region of the world. And I think that's simply a credit to the power and the professionalism and the years of leadership that distributors have provided here in the North American continent. Protect it. It's important. It makes an enormous difference in our industry. Well, that's all very nice and good, and we understand how we all got here to Washington today. I think the question that's on the minds of all forward-looking leaders in our industry and other leaders is, what's going to change with this swirling environment of faster and faster change, with change in demographics, change in your work teams, change in educational levels? What are we all facing in terms of ensuring that our organizations are competitive and can meet the kind of challenges that this industry has historically? So let's start with the role of e-commerce. The question you hear so often in panels that you've all probably attended and participated in, is this really yesterday's news or is it tomorrow's opportunity? It's probably a bit of both if we're truthful with one another. But we all know the implication. If you're behind, you got to catch up. If you're ahead, you better move faster. Because the fundamental disintermediation power of real-time communications and the internet is enormous. We've seen it change many, many industries in a way that people wouldn't have predicted 5 years ago. And I think it has that same opportunity to do it to the world of electrical distribution. It's not simply about conducting an online product reference. It's about doing business fundamentally differently, faster, more accurately, how to connect capabilities and bring enhanced values to customers. And frankly, our customers increasingly want to interact this way. Change is hard. And taking new competitors seriously is always a challenge when you're already busy in your own business. We've not been great at this as an industry. And I would point to what we let happen with the big box industry. We lost that battle. We lost that battle here in North America in terms of a big piece of business that used to fly through electrical distribution. I would urge us to take this issue around e-commerce seriously. What you do today, and more importantly tomorrow, has to be different than what Amazon can bring to your customers. Clearly, I'm not asking you all to buy drones for delivery, but to assume that modern-day fulfillment global partners and players with scale will not make a full-force assault upon your traditional space is simply naive. Fulfillment, distribution, and delivery, those functions are being attacked in every industry. Don't sit still. Don't simply defend your turf. You need to take turf. That's how you beat competitors. You need to take turf and provide new value. And don't look back and see yourself as the whale on the beach. We've seen this happen to too many industries already, and it's easy to get frozen and simply get washed up while the real action's going on out to sea. Second, the role of cyber. Do your employees understand the dangers of phishing attacks? Do you know how many you're receiving at your sites every day? Do you really think you're blocking them? Because you're not. They're getting in. When you see, say, APT, do people in your distributorship think of a payroll servicing company? Or do they recognize that's an advanced, persistent threat? Could you withstand a denial of service that shut off all your systems for a day? How about a week? How about 2 weeks? How about being held ransom for a month, where a hacker approaches you and says they want $500,000 to turn your systems back on, and you watch your costs roll up every day? Are you still thinking that defending the outside of your servers and the outside of your IT system is adequate? Or do you recognize that they're already in your systems? And contemporary organizations are spending their resources and their expertise on figuring out how you identify people when they're in your systems and stop the exfiltration of your key information. If you buy in to the importance of e-commerce and digital enablement, then you need to make a real investment in contemporary cybersecurity. The threats are getting more sophisticated, and so must you and your organization. While many of the high-profile attacks have gone on to the financial institutions, the very big retail organizations, the defense contractors, and yes, some high-level government officials, they are increasingly going after many, many different areas wherever they feel there's economic leverage. How many of you, I would ask, have a friend or associate or know someone in your community who's had their own personal identity hacked, who's had their bank accounts compromised? That's the simple stuff. The complex stuff is when they start to have really big economic impact upon your enterprise. Harden up your defenses and keep upgrading them. And don't take this as a subject that you think, since you addressed it last year, that last year's defenses are adequate for this year. And last but not least, the area of succession. Each of you who are privileged to lead your organization have a great deal on your plate, and I don't need to tell you that. Your business is complicated. The priorities are shifting all the time. Some days it feels like a new crisis emerges every hour, sometimes every half hour. And where do you find the time to think about succession? It's not easy, but frankly, you must. It's the most important thing you do as the individual leading your organization. And it doesn't have to take away from other things. In fact, if you do it right, it's going to help you run your organization even more effectively. Obviously, you've got to recruit and develop outstanding people, but don't be what I term a flat thinker. A flat thinker recruits terrific people, people who are more in tune with many of the new changes I'm talking about, people who think differently than you think, but then doesn't allow them to think differently, doesn't accept their ideas, has a set of filters which restricts the breadth of thinking to be the traditional way your organization's thought about that. You need to be a three-dimensional thinker. A three-dimensional thinker recruits talent, develops talent, and then lets them run, and embraces the different ideas they have, embraces their thoughts about how to deal with these changes that are happening, recognizes this industry will be a different industry 15 years from now than it is today. And you need to recruit from outside your industry, not simply from the electrical distribution industry. You need to go to the industries that have been through a number of these big disintermediation changes and pull in people who've already lived this life, who can help accelerate the learning within your organization. That indeed is the heartblood of any industry, and I believe one of the great strengths of the electrical distribution industry. You've not been afraid of change historically. I encourage you to continue to embrace it in the way that you have. Important today because of the speed of change. Important today because of the breadth of change. Important today because the stakes are higher than they ever have been. We just talk a little bit about the role of NAED. Now, I've had the opportunity to be part of multiple organizations in multiple industries. So many of them do great fundamental work, and certainly NAED does in that regard. I talked a little bit about your evolution and your change, and it's been 34 years since Sally and I attended our very first NAED in Marco Beach, Florida, if I can recall. And as I said in my introduction, these organizations provide enormous value to their constituency, but that value is directly commensurate to the pace of change and to the recognition of the changing requirements of industry associations, and that they have to lead, not follow. And my encouragement for you is that don't fall into the trap of letting an organization be an impediment of change instead of the facilitator of change. Push yourself by bringing other industries, examples of change to your industry. And this will continue to be a very valuable forum for all of you and for this industry. Don't be two-dimensional thinkers. Push yourself to be three-dimensional thinkers. We think of so many of the great innovations that have occurred in the United States and around the world in the last 15 years, and you can define almost every one of those around individuals who had true three-dimensional thinking. Let me just take the example of Amazon and Jeff Bezos. When he began in that enterprise, people had no idea what would grow from his creative genius. His willingness to push the edge on redefining the fundamental power of logistics we're now seeing grow into even new areas. It's not simply about the cloud. It's not simply about a Kindle. It's not simply about books. It's now about fundamental logistics capability. That type of broad-based thinking is what tends to change industries. And I think we've got that opportunity in our own industry to continue to take very broad-based thinking to ensure the competitiveness of this industry over the very long term. On a closing note, as I mentioned, my wife, Sally, who's here with me, who Bill referred to earlier, and Bill, I can't believe you remember that we met at the Alewife Festival in Milwaukee back in the late 1970s, a wonderful art festival that celebrates the smelly fish that die in Milwaukee each summer in the lake. A good example of innovation. We attended our first distributors meeting, as I mentioned, in Marco Beach 34 years ago. And one of the things that I think has always impressed us about this industry is the strength is built on relationships. This is an industry of relationships. It's an industry where relationships matter. They matter not only between you and your customers and your communities, but also between all of us who are manufacturers and all of you who are our distributors. I do hope that's something that will never change. Sally and I have very fond memories of the electrical industry. Very fond memories of our many, many relationships. And as we want to wish you all the best going forward. And so let me just say, please take care of our industry. It's a mainstay of our country, and it's been a mainstay of both Sally's and my life. Thank you very much. It's a real delight to be with you this morning. But I understand the agenda. We've got a couple minutes for questions, either on any of the comments I made or other questions, not including Sally's and my dating. I think there are gentlemen in the audience with microphones for anyone who's got a question. I can't quite see, so. Can't quite hear you. Yes. Yeah, the question for those of you who couldn't hear it was, can you give a little perspective on the Republican National Convention? I mentioned to a couple of you earlier this morning that it seemed like a really good idea 3 years ago. Yeah, we are really proud to be hosting the Republican National Convention in Cleveland. And for those of you who are familiar with conventions, there are two organizations that support a convention. There's what's called a host committee. That's the group that's responsible for recruiting it to a venue, getting the venue equipped, raising all the money, and I'm one of the co-chairs for that. And then there's the Committee on Arrangements, and the Committee on Arrangements for both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party actually runs the convention. And so we're not involved in running the convention, but we did have to raise all the money. Obviously, going to be a pretty exciting convention. We've all been watching both sides of this develop. Obviously, a critical meeting today here in Washington between Speaker Ryan and Mr. Trump. It'll be interesting to see the issue that we thought was going to be true just 4 weeks ago of a contested convention, which would have been the first one since Reagan and Ford actually went to the second ballot for that to be decided for President Ford. We now think this is a little downscoped in size, but clearly the platform fights on both sides, I think, are what both Republican and Democrat are what's now coming into focus as being the critical issue over the next 4 to 5 months. Going to be an exciting summer. We have 4 weeks after the Cavaliers win the NBA championship. That's just a forecast to get the stadium all ready and converted, and it's quite a process in doing that. It's the second highest media event in the world, only behind the Olympics, and so we're delighted to be bringing about $400 million of revenue into Cleveland, about 50,000 people for apparently a big political party for 5 nights. Okay, we've got one over here. Let's take this one right now if the microphone's working.
Good morning, Sandy. What do you see happening after this stage of unparalleled consolidation in not only the manufacturing side, but also the distribution side of our industry? And what do you believe the longer-term impact of that will be, both positively and negatively?
You know, it's a question we've probably talked at these sessions for 30 years. And I can recall the first couple NAEDs I was at, one of the very big issues was there were panels on both implications of manufacturing consolidation and all the line card interruption that causes for each of you when that happens, as well as would all of distribution consolidate into 2 or 3 large international chains. I think what we've seen is the forecasts on both sides that have been done on that have generally been overly aggressive, that there's a vitality in the industry that I think is represented in the entrepreneurial spirit, both of product inventors and individuals who want to break off and form their own distributors, that while the industry does look different than it did back in the 1970s, it's nowhere near as different as people forecast. So I personally think it's an area you have to be very aware of. Clearly, there are different product areas that are far more consolidated in the industry, but at the same time, there are whole new technologies growing. And that vibrancy around the edge tends to keep a balance of larger and smaller manufacturers, as well as specialty distributors and more broad-based distributors. So I'm not of the opinion, and I have not been over the last 25, 30 years, that the industry was going to go through a singular roll-up. I do think there are certain fundamental categories of product where that roll-up has happened, and they become very much fundamental cores for your line cards, but there's an awful lot of, as you know better than I, other diversity out and around that. So I continue to believe as long as we have the creative entrepreneurship in the industry to develop new products, new services, new way of delivering them, I think you're going to have a lot of players of a lot of different sizes.
Hi, Sandy. It's Jim Lucy with Electrical Wholesaling Magazine. Congratulations on your award.
Thank you.
I'm curious about the Internet of Things and electrical distributors and what you see as some of the baseline knowledge their staffs.
Yep,
There we go. Sorry about that. And just some of the knowledge you think on the baseline that they'll need to get into things like connected lighting, perhaps some of the sensors for smart grid, and some of the maybe automation applications. I know it's not a quick question, but just be curious about your thoughts.
Yeah, I think the big issue there, again, is all around application, and it's far more now on the issue of prognostics than diagnostics. You know, frankly, the industry in different categories of products for quite some time has been interconnected. Different product lines have had extensive diagnostic capability already. That really came as early as the 80s. The real question now is, what do you do with the data? And can you really start to predict with this data? Can we start to bring new sources of value to our customers? Can we start to take cost out? Can we help replacement cycles happen on a planned basis? And that's where I think really understanding the world of prognostics, and that requires people with great application knowledge to be able to help tune, let me call it, the capability to the specific application. So again, I'd say more and more and more application expertise.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I can't quite see, so you got to be the judge of whether there are people there or not. We've got one down front here. Question for people who couldn't hear it is in terms of our industry, what wakes you up at 2 o'clock in the morning? I would say safety. I'd say A number one. And I think we all take for granted products we sell off our shelves. They're not powered at that point of view. We tend to treat them like we're selling another one of those. But the critical set of questions around what's the application you're going to apply this product on, we just can never forget that. People making incorrect choices of pairing products, and we see a lot of that. You see a lot of it out there in the marketplace. I say that's the issue, because the reputation in the industry is most fundamentally based on being able to bring electric power to unsophisticated and sophisticated customers applied correctly that ensures their safety. And we can't lose that. That has to be the heart of our training. Terrific. Well, thanks very much. Great to be with you this morning, and have a great conference this week.